if you begin to reevaluate because you start to realize, hey, I've only got 20, 30, 40 years left. I've done 20, 30, 40 years. I'm not where I wanted to be today. So I better make some choices. And that can actually be a good thing. As long as those choices are you stumbling over your job and relationship, wanting a drastic change that includes a sports car?
Or perhaps you are just irritated with life and people and wanting a sea change.
Today's episode is the first of a two-part series on midlife crisis,
where we break down the cause, signs of a midlife crisis, and how it affects you and others.
Stay to the end to find out what part sex has in a midlife crisis. Let's dive in.
Welcome to Rewrite Your Story, the podcast where change begins with you.
We're your hosts, Stephen and Sharlene.
As professional coaches and mentors trained in various modalities, we have helped hundreds of people
bridge the gap between the person they are
and the person they want to be.
We bring you conversations with real people who have overcome real setbacks.
You will walk away with practical steps to find more clarity, alignment, and success in any area you want to improve.
So join us and discover how you have the power to overcome, to change, and to rewrite your story.
So pick up the pen. Your new chapter starts now. So, Stephen, we're going to be looking at today's theme of what is midlife crisis.
I think when we've chosen this topic for a few reasons. Now, the first one being probably seen a few people in our life go through a midlife crisis, or what we think is a midlife crisis. Not sure if they think it's a midlife crisis, but also really debunking what a midlife crisis is, because when we were looking at this, we actually realized that a lot of things that people actually label others as going through a midlife crisis could actually be a sign of depression or a sign of, I can't say the word. You have to say it. Man.
Oh, menopause. He's too shy to talk about it.
Menopause. Don't want to offend anyone. It could be actually, no, not just menopause, but actually hormonal changes in both men and women. So we really wanted to debunk it, but also look at what's actually happening for people at a deeper level. When we started doing a lot more research and really diving into the topic, we also realized that one topic just didn't do it justice.
One episode was just too much for us to put everything all together.
So we're going to divide it into two episodes. So we're doing a two-part series on the midlife crisis. But this one, we're going to talk about how it actually affects the individual person, either in a relationship or as a single, because usually you go through a midlife crisis as an individual. Mm-hmm. But we're also next week going to look at it, how it affects marriages and relationships, because the ripple effect or the consequences are
far-reaching.
Yes. So next week we're going to talk about how it affects couples. We're also going to talk around how it affects people's sex lives as couples and their relationships. So, Sharlene, what is a midlife crisis?
Oh my gosh, look, it's actually a period of emotional instability and self-doubt that often occurs between ages 40 and 60. That's pretty scary considering that we're in our 40s, right?
We are in our 40s and we're hitting our 50s very soon. So there is a lot of where are the prime candidates, but being able to talk about it, you know how to navigate through it.
Yeah, I think we've got some pretty good skills together, right?
I think I'll go through one a day.
One midlife crisis a day.
One midlife crisis a day. But I guess it happens during these people's, as you said, people are grappling with these feelings, but it's a period of time that people actually start to reassess their lives.
Yeah.
People realize they're on a hamster wheel. They're just doing the same old. And they're reassessing their lives, thinking, I don't want to do this anymore. Or do I have to do this for another 20, 30 years?
Or what am I going to do now that this major life event has happened?
Yeah, because
it's changed.
Children growing up, leaving the house or going to university or whatever it is. So a lot of things are happening during that path and we begin to question. And we've always said that questioning is good.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a healthy questioning though, and then there's an unhealthy questioning.
And so healthy questioning to get to the root cause, to find a solution is actually quite good.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's actually important to recognize that a midlife crisis isn't just about feeling down or nostalgic though. It can actually involve a deep existential questioning and a strong desire to make life-altering changes. So sometimes that looks like it just affects you, then we don't realize that the people around us actually notice these things, and that can actually affect other people too.
And the intensity of the feeling is very individual.
Yeah.
Some people go through midlife crisis and you would hardly know, whereas others would go through a midlife crisis and everyone knows.
All over. Yes. It's very obvious.
You know, and let's look at the stereotypical, what people would say a midlife crisis looks like is he left his wife, he got the younger woman, he bought the Ferrari.
Yeah.
You know, and that's just his
Probably got into deeper debt too.
Deeper debt. That's just stereotypical. That is not what an actual midlife crisis is. That's what society has painted a midlife crisis to be. And yes, people do that, but is it really a midlife crisis or something deeply unfulfilled in their lives?
Right. It can also be a wake-up call to evaluate what truly matters in our life.
I think no matter what you're going through, you know, you need to trust God in it. And I think Proverbs 3, 5, and 6 says, trust in the Lord with all your heart. Lean not on your own understandings. In all your ways acknowledge him, and he's going to direct your path. And I think that is key, you know. When we're going through hard circumstances, when we're going through times of questioning, we're just going to trust in the source, who is our hope.
Yeah.
And I think that's important.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, one of the things that we need to know about is to acknowledge your feelings. This is one of the first steps towards healthy management of midlife crisis, is to recognize these feelings are common and that you're not alone in experiencing them. You're not by yourself. There's so many people that go through this. Just because they might express it differently or maybe not look like they've got a problem, it doesn't mean they don't have a problem.
That's right. And I think, you know, we need to really look at what leads to a midlife crisis. Yeah. So if we figure out what leads to a midlife crisis, we can start to we can start to see the red flags in our life and start to identify those red flags. So we've got a few things that we want to talk about. And the first one is the realization of mortality. I think as we age, we become more acutely aware that our days on earth are limited.
Yeah.
And therefore, by knowing that our days are on earth, and we've done a lot of episodes on being death aware, you know, because when you embrace death, you can embrace your purpose. But I think a lot of people who are not death aware, realizing that they have an a defined amount of time left, can start to make irrational choices, or it can start to prompt them to reevaluate their life, their accomplishments, and their choices. And that reevaluation is not wrong. You know, if you begin to reevaluate because you start to realize, hey, I've only got 20, 30, 40 years left. I've done 20, 30, 40 years. I'm not where I wanted to be today. So I better make some choices. And that can actually be a good thing, as long as those choices are in line with your purpose.
And your core value.
And your core values. They're not in line with unfulfilled needs at a unconscious level that are based on some insecurity.
That's right. So not comparing yourself against who you think you should be right now, or who you think you should be because of what someone else is achieving in their life, or what you see someone else achieving.
Absolutely. Sharlene, do you want to talk about the second one?
Absolutely. There's so much to say about unfulfilled goals. You know, a lot of people are reflecting on unachieved dreams or goals, which can lead to regret and dissatisfaction. So wherever they are in life, you know, they've looked at the things in their past and they're thinking, I should have done this by now. Look how old I am. I haven't done this yet. I haven't achieved this. I'm so old and I haven't gotten all these things that I've set out to achieve. And that can really lead to a sense of dissatisfaction in life.
And you know what? Reality check is a lot of people don't achieve everything they set out to be, you know,
That's right.
By the time they're 40 to 60, you know. You probably got less time to achieve it now, you know, especially if you're at the upper end of that 20-year period, but it doesn't mean you can't.
That's right. You know, it doesn't make it impossible, does it?
Exactly. I always use the analogy of Colonel Sanders, you know. He was retired when he realized he couldn't live on his pension and knew how to make chicken and has been making chicken ever since.
And got how many rejections?
Yeah.
Rejections upon rejections.
Heaps and heaps of rejections, went out on his own, and now there's a global, you know, franchise all over the world, killing thousands of people with cholesterol and heart disease. But hey, He made it. And that's it.
Satisfying people's taste buds worldwide.
Right. The other one is, the third one is physical changes. And I think people don't realize that this plays a huge part in the midlife crisis. So one, if we look at the male, there's a decrease in testosterone. Your testosterone levels start to decrease. The aging process starts to begin. Those wrinkles start to form. If you're losing your youth, your vitality, your attractiveness. And then we've also got the same with women going through menopause and those hormonal changes and those imbalances that are occurring. And then, again, comparatitis. You see the 50, 60-year-old Botox to the heels woman on social media. You think, wow, I want to look like that. But, at what cost is she looking like that? We don't know the cost behind why she looks like that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think a lot of media has a big part to play with that, with it. The unhealthy beauty standards these days, isn't it? You got to look a particular way to be beautiful, right?
Yeah. And realizing that this too can be triggers for midlife crisis, but it's not the influencer that's the trigger. It's everything that's happening. It's the changes. It's the marriage dynamics, the relationship dynamics that are happening, which leads us to the major life events. The next one, the children leaving the home. I'm no longer needed. My identity is being challenged or changed.
Yeah, absolutely. There's that empty nester syndrome. What do I do now? I've spent so many years looking after my children, putting into them. And instead of saying the positives, hey, I did a really good job. They don't need me anymore. They're gone out and they're healthy and they're learning to do things on their own. But they take it to the point that, there's that insecurity that I'm not needed anymore. What do I do? I'm not used to this sort of phase of life.
And it's also at this time in men that they are surpassed for promotions, which can also lead to that question in that lack of confidence and that midlife crisis, or the drive changes.
Yeah. Wow.
Okay. Or the thrill of the drive changes, and therefore we look for the thrill in something else, which can lead to an affair or something along those lines.
It's like the shiny object syndrome, right?
Shiny object syndrome. So, and not realizing that the drive's always been there, but the drive has been misdirected. For some reason, you've pivoted and that drive's been misdirected in some major life event. But also too, you've been dad, you were, it's like this, right? You were boyfriend and girlfriend, then you were a couple, and then you were engaged, and then you were married, and then you were a newly married couple, and then you became parents, and then you're mum, you were dad, you were coach, you were teacher, you were cleaner, you were Uber driver, you were, Uber Eats, you were all of that for such a long period of time. The children have gone, who the hell am I now?
Yeah, and they forget about who they were before they had kids, right?
The couple, the newly married,
that's right.
Rekindling that. So these major life events are leading to the breakdown of the identity of the two, and rather than re-looking at the identity of the two together, they're starting to look at the identity of the individual.
That's right. And that's probably a lot of times divorce can actually act as a significant trigger as well in there.
And we saw that a lot during COVID, because all of a sudden, these two people that lived together were forced to live together.
Really live together.
And so we saw there was a huge rate of breakdowns and breakups in relationships during COVID.
That's right.
The next one is work and career dissatisfaction.
Right. So basically, if we look at this, it's realizing that one's career hasn't provided the fulfillment expected. This can lead to existential questioning, who am I? Why am I here? Why am I doing this work? Where to from now?
What's the purpose?
What is the purpose of this role, this job, right?
Yeah.
And especially if they become dissatisfied and they feel like, I don't know what to do now.
And, we're not saying that career, most people will change their career 6 times in a lifetime. Do you know what I mean? Nothing wrong with that. It's during this time, but that we can sometimes make decisions that are not in our best interest.
That's right.
And what's that thing that you always say?
Yeah, you don't want to make permanent decisions based on heightened emotions.
Yes. No permanent decisions during heightened emotions.
So if we look at shifts in identity.
Well, we've already spoken to that. That's the transition of the children growing up, the retirement, that loss of identity, that loss of purpose. You know, who am I? So these are all factors that can contribute to midlife crises. Yeah. And I think these triggers are so deeply personal, and they vary from person to person. Yeah. And like, people could be satisfied with their 9 to 5. People might like the hamster wheel. There's no right or wrong.
And that's okay.
You know, there's couples out there that are a couple before they're parents. Yeah. But there's others that are parents before they're couples. Yeah. Do you know what I mean? And I think, you know, we don't have children, so I don't know the dynamics of that. But I think it's important to be a couple first. Yeah. Parents there later.
That's right.
Because then when the children are no longer needing the parents, you're still a couple.
That's right. You know? You're still friends. You find that common ground together, finding something different to pull together, right?
Yeah. And so people that go through these, it's crucial to understand that midlife crises are often a response to these changes and the emotions they evoke.
Right. Yeah. So true. You know, in Ecclesiastes 3:1, it says, we are reminded that to everything there is a season and a time for every matter under heaven. Every matter under heaven. Gosh, look at that. Even midlife crisis, right? Yeah. There's a purpose for that. There's a purpose for us to reevaluate our goals. There's a purpose for that dissatisfaction so that we're not become complacent in our life. We can find a new purpose.
And it's important to know that everything is for a season. Yeah. Nothing is permanent, you know. Everything, you know, there's everything that we've gone through or ever will go through. Somebody has already gone through that.
That's right.
And the best advice is to find out those who overcame what you're going through and learn from what they learned. Yeah. Learn from what they did to overcome that challenge.
You know, sometimes I feel that a lot of people that go through certain situations some of the unhealthy ways that they look at this is they'll try to find other people that are going through the same thing where they're at, just to validate what they're feeling right now and the decisions that they want to make that may not necessarily be healthy for that lifestyle right now.
Like attracts like, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Like one of the things I've seen during this period and of different people that have gone through this, and it's really sad actually, if you think about it, is when we first, like, we've been married almost 25 years. So we're 24 years this year. Next year will be 25 years. But when we first got married, me and you made a decision that we would never speak bad about each other to someone else.
That's right.
And we've never done that.
That's right.
I've never spoken bad about you to anyone else, and you've never done that, because that was a commitment we made early on in our relationship. Yeah. And one of the sad things about couples going through midlife crisis when they're in a couple is the stuff they talk about the other partner.
Oh, yeah. Like putting them down.
And it's not in a trusted, like, there's a place to talk about someone to seek healthy advice. Yeah. But there's a place to talk about someone to vent and to bitch.
Yeah. When you're just venting, it's not healthy. Yeah. I mean, there's a difference between venting to someone that you know is a trusted, reliable source who's able to give you feedback and challenge the BS, you know, and get through that BS to help you think about other ways of coping or other ways of viewing a situation, rather than just being stuck in that little rut. And then just venting to just a friend that's just, oh yeah, you're so right.
But then what happens when that friend is going through something similar? Your problems and their problems escalate, perpetuate, right. And then it becomes
feeding
each other, all men, all women, you know, we start to generalize.
Ah, yes.
You know, and therefore when it just say does end up in a broken relationship and you're ready to move on, well, you're bringing all that garbage with you in the new relationship because you've already made that unconscious limiting belief that all men or all women
that's right.
are like this because you haven't healed from that.
Yeah.
And that's not only midlife crisis. That's in any marital crisis.
Yeah.
And there are places where divorce is necessary. We're not saying we're anti-divorce. That's not the case, but we're like, use wisdom. So I think you need to view the time of a midlife crisis as a period of time for potential growth and realignment with your true values,
Right.
rather than use it as the explosive, reactive, leave your partner, get the younger man or woman, buy the car, buy the beachside house. Do you know what I mean? Leave your job, sell everything and move to a farm in Byron Bay rather than do that.
Hey, some people might want to do that.
Actually, it sounds good right now. It's about realigning with your true values.
Yeah. Romans 8:28 says, and we know that in all things God works for the good of those who love him, who have been called according to his purpose. It's so encouraging to know, isn't it, Stephen, that we can rely on that.
Yeah. So let's have a look at some signs of a midlife crisis. The first one is drastic behavioral changes. Sharlene, do you want to talk into this one?
Yeah, absolutely. Sometimes when we go through these things, yes, there's times where we might go through like a drastic, sudden character change out of depression or different areas, but this is also like, midlife crisis. And not everybody will go through sudden change, right? How to say? A common theme that we tend to see, people will often go through sudden lifestyle changes such as adopting new hobbies or become obsessed over a certain activity that they want to do, altering their appearance perhaps, going for surgeries to fix up how they want to see themselves or making impulsive decisions to buy big expensive things.
Yeah. And in some cases that is okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
It is the drastic behavior changes, like that is so far out. Like if you've spoken for years and years and years that you want to have a mummy makeover, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's not a drastic change or a drastic body alterations. If that's something you've spoken for many years and have, been saving up for it, that's fine. What we're talking about is all of a sudden, you get all this work done for no apparent reason. There's no rhyme or reason to your decisions.
Yeah, it's just like you wake up just one day and say, yeah, that's what I want to do.
The other one is obsession with the past, like absolute preoccupation with past decisions, regrets, and often wanting to go back to it. And then that's another sign, isn't it? Like they're obsessed with their past, and then all of a sudden they're doing things that they used to do as a youth. And you're like,
trying to recapture the youth, dressing like a young person.
Yeah, what is going on with you? Like, seriously, since when do you wear bomber pants and a bomber jacket and start skateboarding all the, again, it's the high risk behavior. It's, for instance, used to take drugs and haven't taken, participate. No, I'm talking about recreational drugs. And all of a sudden you're going back into those recreational drugs and you're like, that behavior, that obsession with the past and recapturing is something really typical of a midlife crisis. The party drugs, and all of a sudden they're partying again, and you're like, hey, this is not aligning with who you are.
Yeah. It's like kind of almost like dropping all responsibilities of what you used to have for that young lifestyle that you said, like where you didn't have to worry about anything.
Like if you are, for instance, in your 40s and 50s, and you have always had a good time and you've always gone out and partied and it hasn't changed throughout the years, that's not a midlife crisis.
No.
It's the sudden change.
Yes, that's right. It's a sudden change out of the blue.
Out of the blue. That's like, oh, this just does not.
Yeah, like what's going on there? Right? So there's a desire for major change. There's that strong urge to make those life-altering changes, like switching careers, relocating, or ending a relationship even.
Yeah, it's like, let's up and go. So it's a desire, and it's the belief that if I just leave this city,
everything will be better.
Everything will be better. And it's that unconscious programming that, I think everybody has an element to. If I just left her or if I left him, everything's going to be better. He's the cause of all my, problems, or she's the cause of all my problems, or this job is the cause of all my problems, or this city is the cause, or whatever it is. It's those major decisions, not realizing that wherever you go, you're right there.
That's right. Can't run away from you.
You can't run away from you, right? It's the mood swings and irritability, frequent mood swings, irritability, and feelings of sadness and discomfort. Now, these mood swings and irritability are caused by the deep dissatisfaction of where you are today.
Yeah.
So you're just angry with life in general.
Yeah. Yeah, that's right. And like, you can get caught in it, or you can find ways to reevaluate and seek help. Get someone to take you through this.
Yeah. You're just shitty with life.
Yeah.
And because you're shitty with life, you're shitty with everyone. And because you're shitty with everyone, you're just irritable.
Yeah.
And then also, apart from just being shitty with life and all that, another factor it could be those hormonal changes.
Yeah.
It could be, the less resilience at the moment, or if you're a woman going through, it could be those mood swings. It could be hot flashes. Men, it could be the lower resistance because of the lack of testosterone, and therefore the heightened sense of emotions because of the heightened amount of estrogen as well. So there's a lot to play here. Those chemical imbalances.
Yeah.
The next one is questioning life's purpose. So the deep existential doubt and confusion about the meaning of your life or the place you're in at the moment.
That's right.
And I think we've already spoken about that. And, it's okay to question your life's purpose.
Yeah.
It's okay to realign at any time.
Yeah. Impulsive decisions also play a part in this, where you're engaging in risky behaviors all of a sudden, such as extravagant purchases or quitting a stable job without having a backup plan.
It's the Ferrari. It's the Porsche. It's the Lamborghini.
Whatever that looks like, that shiny object.
Okay. Another one. Okay.
Yeah.
This just came to me. It's the tattoo.
Right.
How many people, I have tattoos. I'm not against tattoos, but how many people do you see at that age where did that come from? Do you know what I mean? It's like, but I've always wanted one. Yeah, you always have, but it's not part of your behavior.
Yeah.
It's those impulsive decisions.
And sometimes even going with a really extreme haircut change, hairstyle change. You see those ladies in the movies, they had the long hair and all of a sudden just one day, boom, just cut it all off, They just go through such an extreme change.
And sometimes the change is as good as a holiday.
Hello. Yeah. And that's okay.
Withdrawal from family and friends. So beginning to get emotionally disconnected and socially withdrawn from your loved one. Then not only your family and friends, but also your partner.
Yeah.
This can be a sign of a midlife crisis. Increased focus on physical appearance. So heightened concern for your appearance, often involved in cosmetic procedures, extreme dieting, or excessive exercises. Someone who hasn't gone to and, probably done exercise in their life, but not really good at it, or not a regular habit, all of a sudden becoming a CrossFit junkie, which nothing against CrossFit, but at certain ages, at 40, with decreased testosterone or things like that happening, there's also the potential increase for injury. So you've seen a lot of people within that age group, hitting the gym every day, causing injury, and then not being able to go, rather than having a more balanced approach to it.
Yeah, that's right. Just all of a sudden, not considering the stage in life that you're in, just making all these drastic changes without taking it slowly or finding healthy ways to manage that.
Another sign is a change in sleep patterns. So either sleeping too much or sleeping not enough.
Not getting enough sleep, that's right. Feelings of emptiness, where you're feeling that pervasive sense of emptiness or lack of fulfillment, despite the external success or stability. You got all the success, but you're still what am I doing? What else is even this for?
Yeah. And you know what? That feeling of emptiness can actually propel people to a really fulfilled life. You've seen a lot of people, I think Ange, who we interviewed in episode 2, she had that feeling of a bit of emptiness in her job, went on a mission trip, and now runs an orphanage and is a mama to many, because she found her fulfillment out of her emptiness. So there's actually great things that can happen out of that.
Absolutely. So it can be a good thing or it can be a bad thing. It just depends on how you respond to it.
So knowing that you're going through a midlife crisis now, how am I going to respond to it?
That's right.
So it's really important, Sharlene, addressing the underlying issues of a midlife crisis. It's important to approach the changes with compassion.
Yes, and self-awareness.
Yeah, I'm not a very compassionate person.
We all have different levels of compassion
Yes,
for different
we
things, right? So, Psalm 34:17-18 says, offer comfort. These are for comfort during challenging times. It says, the righteous cry out, and the Lord hears them. He delivers them from all their troubles. The Lord is close to the brokenhearted and saves those who are crushed in spirit. So turning to God in times of distress can actually provide the strength and comfort needed to navigate these feelings.
I think it's really important that as if you're going through a midlife crisis and you can see any of these, that you're just aware of them and just give yourself time to process rather than making any sudden changes based on emotion. So it's really taking the time to really process, really, hey, you know what? I'm not satisfied in my job right now, but I'm just going to wait and I'm going to know when the time is right to leave. It's making those types of decisions. Also seeking some spiritual and professional guidance. Talk to a mentor, talk to a pastor, talk to a coach, talk to a counselor, talk to Sharlene. She's available just to get that guidance.
That's right. So Psalm 55:22 says, cast your cares on the Lord and he will sustain you. He will never let the righteous be shaken.
I wonder if we can talk about, does a midlife crisis actually affect men and women differently?
How does it affect us? So, if you think about it, midlife crisis can affect both men and women, but their experiences and manifestations can often be different due to societal expectations. So things that people put on them, the gender roles and personal circumstances.
I think for men, midlife crisis always revolves around career and achievement. So I spoke about that drive before.
Yeah.
So men place high value and importance around their careers, around financial stability, around other things. And next week, we're going to talk about one of the ways men place high value is around sex.
Yeah.
So we're going to talk about that next week. So when that is beginning to get challenged, because next week we're going to talk about, if men place such high value around sex and then women are going through those hormonal balances, how is he relating to that and how is he unconsciously being affected by that, not realizing what's happening and just how communication is important. But we're going to dive into that next week. But these things trigger the crisis in a man. So for women, we see that it's around society and those expectations.
Yeah.
For men, we see it's actually around career, achievement, and sex, which trigger these midlife crises. So when we feel unfulfilled in these areas, so when a woman is feeling unfulfilled in her role in society or her role or how she's perceived by society or her peers, or when a man is feeling unfulfilled around his career, finance, and sex, that's what triggers the midlife crisis.
Wow. Pretty profound.
Yeah. So it's also, in addition to that, both are facing the loss of vitality and attractiveness.
Yeah, absolutely. It makes sense, right? It's like even societal status can challenge a man's sense of masculinity and the way he sees himself.
Exactly. And there's the rise of what people would call toxic masculinity these days. But is it toxic? Is it positive? Everyone's going to see it differently.
Yeah.
And I think, we need to go back to the Bible to redefine what masculinity is, but also we need to go back to the Bible to define what femininity is, and have that balance. And I think the perfect example of that was Christ.
Yeah.
He was balanced in everything.
So true.
Okay. And so this leads to externalized behaviors. We try to validate how others see us.
Okay.
And therefore we're posting it on social media.
Yeah.
So it's a lack of that success. It's the lack of the social validation that causes us to go into these expensive behaviors and items and, have an affair or pursue a risky hobby, or get the six-pack and the tattoo to go on top of it because we want society to view us in a way that we no longer view ourselves.
Yeah. So even though it's almost like, even though we might have all these flashy things, inside we're still sort of feeling empty, feeling unfulfilled, feeling like that we're not really worthy, but that propels us to do more of these things to try and get that validation. And we still we sort of base, we I guess, rely on external validation rather than on who we are from the inside.
Yeah. And so the key is one, self-love, and two, knowing who you are and knowing where your security comes.
Yeah.
But there's more about women, isn't there?
That's right. Yeah. I mean, for women, a midlife crisis may be more emotionally focused, right? And it's often triggered by life transitions such as menopause. So we're going through all these hormonal changes in our body. Even children leaving home, or like the children in your life, they don't have to be your biological children. They might be your nephews or your nieces, or if you've started to take care of them as your children. But young people leaving your home after you've been caring for them for a long time, or shifts in caregiving roles.
Yeah, because this is really important too, because in your 40s and 50s and 60s, you then become what is called the sandwich generation. Because not only are you caring for your children and you start caring for your children and grandchildren, you're now also the primary caregiver for your parents.
Right.
And so that identity shift that, hey, I'm no longer their child, I'm now their caregiver, and their carer. And I'm just thinking of my mother because she makes it very well known. When I say no to her, she goes, but you're my carer. If I was to, and I don't say no to my mother very often, I'm not allowed because I'm her carer.
Women may actually experience a crisis as they realize they've neglected personal goals or dreams in favor of family or caregiving roles. So, it's that whole, regret over the things that they've neglected in their lives because of, them taking priority over something else in their life. And they misplace this sense of, it's almost like a resentment. It's like instead of, some people may take it that way, that they start to resent the people in their lives that they cared for, not realizing that they themselves made that a priority over their own goals. But that's okay, because, if you come to a place, you can still move forward and find a new purpose. You can find a new way of coming back to that when you're ready. It can lead to a desire for other things, right? It can lead to a desire for deeper emotional connections and significant life changes, which it's just actually a very healthy thing to do.
Sharlene, as you were talking about that, I remember when I was in Bible college, and I remember I think it was Dr. Jackie Gray. He was a Australian scholar, and she, I think, and I've got to find this out, but I think she did a study on women pastors versus men pastors in the church, and why there was so much more male pastors, ministers, in leadership roles. Like, I'm not talking about church leadership roles, but I'm talking about like at state and executive levels, right? And her study found it was actually what you just said, that women in ministry gave up periods of time of ministry to be mothers, to become children, to care for children, to have a family, and therefore putting the ministry not on hold, but not
as a priority,
not the pursuit of higher levels of ministry. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Like just doing what they were doing within a church level and things like that, and not pursuing further studies or masters and doctrines in theology. And it was just, when you were talking about it, I'm like that. Yeah, it's a real thing amongst women. You do put your career path sometimes on hold for a family and decisions like that. And then there's that sense of regret. But then there's other women, like I look at some of my family members, like I think of one of my family members, all she ever wanted to be was a mom. And she is fulfilled as a mom. Even with adult kids now, she's still fulfilled being a mom of adult boys, so it really depends on the person.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I think the key difference often lies in how the crisis is experienced. Whereas men tend to externalize their crisis men will externalize the midlife crisis through lifestyle changes, through the tattoos, through the visible, the younger woman,
the purchases,
the toys, the bling, the things
boy
like
toys, right?
boy toys and things like that. Whereas women, what you're saying, will internalize the struggle emotionally.
Yeah, they really process and delve deep into their emotions about that.
Which is really interesting because usually it's the opposite. Usually men internalize the emotions
Yeah.
and women are more expressive.
Yeah.
But during this phase of midlife crisis, it's almost as though the roles reverse. And that's why there's that confusion as this is not normal. This must be a midlife crisis.
Yeah. I mean, I'm sure there's a lot of ladies that probably do externalize in some ways, but then there's like, what I think of internalizing is still, I believe that as women, we are very connection oriented. So we like to connect with our fellow females. So we'll find someone to talk to about it, but we'll not necessarily, I guess, express it outwardly to the whole world to see.
So understanding these differences can help in addressing the crisis more effectively.
That's right. So Proverbs 31:25 reminds us, she is clothed with strength and dignity. She can laugh at the days to come. Now, this verse actually encourages women in particular to embrace their inner strength during midlife transitions.
Yeah, I really like that. So I think the difference here is, and the takeaway is to understand the differences, the gender differences, and recognize that men and women may express their midlife crisis differently. Yeah. And we do see that, you know, it's very rarely that you will say, well, she's going through a midlife crisis.
True.
You know, that term midlife crisis is often reserved to men.
Because they're so obvious about it.
Because they're obvious, because of the external demonstration. So I think if you're in a relationship, offer understanding and support rather than judgment during this time. And I think that's really important. But I guess it's also understanding. And, you know, like you gave the verse for women, that their strength, you know, Proverbs 31, their strength is internal. But also for the men, you know, Ephesians 5:25 says, husbands, love your wives just as Christ loved the church and gave himself for her. So it's this mutual dance, this mutual love dance between the husband and wife in open communication. And when next week, we're going to be talking about how to navigate midlife crisis in your marriage.
This is going to be very interesting.
So yeah, we're leaving no stone unturned next week.
Thank you for joining us on the Rewrite Your Story podcast.
We hope you found this episode enlightening.
For more information on the topics discussed, please visit our website at stephenansharlene.com.
Don't forget to subscribe to our podcast on your favorite platform, share it with your friends, and follow us on social media at Stephen and Sharlene.
Until next time, stay informed and inspired.
This is Stephen and Sharlene signing off from the Rewrite Your Story podcast. Thank you and stay blessed.